who I am, where am I going to put in myself, what is my strength, how do I optimize my potential, right? I had an edge over any other person because I had experienced that level of competition, that rejection, be it dealing with patients, be it working in a company like Reckitt where my brother worked for around 10 years, then making a move abroad to South Africa as well, balancing between religion, professional and personal achievements was something that I learned from them. Everybody has a different use case on how we can grow them in Pakistan, right? So for me, the biggest challenge, if I could talk to you in Pakistan, is one is the adherence to make a move regarding data. And then the second part is
Our guest today, Zubair Qureshi, is the Chief Business Officer of Dun & Bradstreet, Pakistan. He's one of the few leaders who have driven commercial success for companies such as Daraz, Careem, Coca-Cola and Jazz in Pakistan.
Oil companies are using us in terms of buying oil from different sectors globally and also doing due diligence with some companies who are buying in terms of credit. So we do credit evaluation as well. We can add value in terms of building a specialized model.
Ample amount of data and use cases that are being done in emerged markets.
Yeah. My suggestion to a lot of corporates or companies is
today he will be delivering a masterclass in the power of data-driven decision making in markets like Pakistan, which are very unpredictable and very volatile.
A 170-year-old data company whose responsibility and whose main aim is to provide company-level data that helps better in
Zubair Qureshi, you have a very diverse background. You have been a part of a lot of startups and well-established organizations. And you have been involved in many challenging situations when the markets are changing their directions and flows. Now, how your journey has been to date and what is the driving factor that got you to be in those positions to begin with?
Right, great. Thank you, Amin. First of all, for inviting me here. I'd like to take a step back and talk a little bit about my personal journey, and then I'll delve into my professional journey simultaneously. So growing up, I came from a middle-class family. I'm the youngest amongst a sibling class of 5. Mashallah, say everybody in my house is well educated. We have a doctor, we have a sales director, we have an HRBP, we have a pharmaceutical person as well. So with me being the youngest in my family, I saw this sense of grit and urgency and hard work that they try to instill, right? So just starting off, when I was young, we used to think of on major talking points amongst our siblings about what we learned over the weekends, how was this week, and just a recall about how life has been. So that basically stuck with me. So when I started off my career, I started off from Jazz in the corporate sales sector. Very cutthroat. Telecom is a very cutthroat sector. Back in 2014, I was in corporate sales in Karachi. Worked for around a year over there. Very difficult in terms of competitiveness because you have all these big players. You name it, Ufone, Telecom, Warid. By the way, the Warid merger was there. So I've been also a part of a lot of mergers as well. I'll talk about it a little bit in detail. And you'll find that out why. And acquisitions as well. So worked for around a year and a half over there. Then I decided that I should pursue my master's. Did my bachelor's from CBM, by the way, missed that part. So I did my master's from IBA, left my job 2016 to 2018, purely focused on my MBA. Graduated in 2018, then got recruited as a management trainee in the Coca-Cola Export Corporation in Lahore. Purely a Karachiite, first time moved to Lahore, switched over there. Worked for around 2 years in Coke. Then there was this startup buzz, right? 2019, everybody was like, what is happening in the world? Pakistan also came up with that ecosystem wave about how startups are evolving in a country like Pakistan. So jumped on the bandwagon, joined Careem, came back to Karachi. Was missing home a lot. So just came back, went into the supply acquisition role for the South region in Pakistan. Uber was here, by the way. A lot of competition. The acquisition was not directly, it was announced, but officially we were working in separate legs. So Careem was separate from Uber as well. So around worked for a year and a half over there was very challenging as well because competition was high. We were also facing challenges from the local taxi mafia or the bus mafia that we had at that time. Then players like Swivel Airlift were also coming in, which was also a threat to our business in terms of competition. 2 years down the line was working over there, then had another opportunity, another startup, Daraz, as the supply acquisition manager of Pakistan. Worked for around 4 years in Daraz. It was built around multiple roles. Started off with supply acquisition for the marketplace sellers in Pakistan. Then it evolved towards looking after the key accounts, which was the mall sellers. Then also towards the B2B business, which was corporate partnerships. Then my last stint was around retail and corporate partnerships. And then in around 4 years of this time, I spent this time around in these specific roles. After 4 years, I joined another company called Dun& Bradstreet. July 2024 was the time period I started off. So overall, I feel like in a country like Pakistan, and it's not a stable market, to be honest. So in terms of understanding, I feel like the learning that you get in a country like Pakistan, because it's a hard market to look at, especially in terms of concepts like price sensitivity, tough competition, that basically sets you apart in terms of an individual and how you're trying to shape up versus any other country of the world.
What I really find interesting is that you mentioned that growing up, the bar was set really high for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
So looking at your siblings, one is studying medicine, pharmacy, and then doing all the great things.
Yeah.
How was it like growing up for you? Did you feel a lot of pressure? Did you feel that, oh my God, I need to live up to the expectations, or the drive was coming in intrinsically? Was it the actual drive to learn and be better? What was it like growing up? Just bring us back at the beginning.
So if I answer this question very directly, it was a bit of both, right? So it was inspiration and it was pressure directly, right? Because we had so much of belief in my siblings that they were doing so well, mashallah, in terms of their educational background, their work experience. However, I felt like I had an edge over any other person because I had experienced that level of competition, that rejection, that understanding of how working nights as a doctor, spending nights in different organizations, be it hospitals, be it dealing with patients, be it working in a company like Reckitt, where my brother worked for around 10 years, then making a move abroad to South Africa as well. My sister, who was a B pharmaceutical student from here, from Karachi University, she was also working along the pharmaceutical industry in companies like BMS, Green Star, and different organizations, right? And then they moved abroad. Once she got married, she went to Abu Dhabi as well. So in terms of understanding, I feel like there was a lot of competition, but it was very healthy because I was the youngest in my family. Hence, in terms of getting that learning of how to build your character and resilience was something I really closely kept it to my heart because these were the values that my people who I looked up to. So I had leaders in my own house primarily. So these were people who I looked up to. However, there was always this competition of where are you going to land up? What are you going to do? Right?
Your own identity.
My own identity about who I am. Where am I going to put in myself? What is my strength? How do I optimize my potential? Right? Because obviously, the bar was so high that you were always on a edge of how you're trying to make it, how you're trying to capture it.
It's like a healthy paranoia.
Absolutely.
Where you are constantly seeing how you can be
pushing
better.
yourself to the best limits, right?
Yes,
so
yes.
Being good enough was never enough in terms of how we were doing things in my house. And I feel like in terms of the culture, I felt like at a very young age, I got this understanding of how people are, what are perspectives, how are relationships built internally, professionally, personally, because my siblings were much older than me, right?
Okay.
So in my young age, I saw 3 marriages of my sisters happening in my house. So that perspective also was there. Then professionally, I saw people building their careers, moving abroad, taking that step and going outside Pakistan, building their career in Pakistan as well, handling things like nepotism, challenges in terms of how organizations are growing and building that. So those were values that I directly instilled after getting that learning from a very young age.
So I'm assuming that your parents had a lot to do with this drive, right?
Yeah.
So what was it like? What your parents did?
Okay.
And you said that you come from a middle class family. So how was it like for your parents?
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of my family, my father was an oil engineer. He was working in Saudi Arabia for around 20, 30 years. So primarily a very purpose-driven guy, built his life from the ground up, started off from a very humble beginning, started doing multiple, by the way, he did 2 jobs as well, from what he tells us in the initial period. My mom was a housewife, so usually my dad was abroad during my early years, and it was primarily my mom and my elder brother running the house in terms of, I remember they used to write out stuff on diaries, and the old perspective of how to build expenses, managing, and that perspective of saving money, uh, knowing the value of what to spend, how to spend, where to spend, because we were a lot, matlab, in terms of how the people were, in terms of how we want to grow as individuals, how we want to spend, how we want to save, and what is prioritized, what is not prioritized. One thing that I learned, especially from my father, was that he compromised on anything but education, right? So all my siblings went to the top schools. One thing that I also made sure in terms of my understanding was that I read a lot of books. As an individual, it's something I tell to my peers as well, that we go out and we spend a lot of money on a meal. Why can't we spend that money on a book, right? So that's something that I truly believe in, and that helped me, right? That the value of education, especially for somebody who is more likely primarily going in a corporate sector, or even on an entrepreneurial journey, is because the learnings that you get from understanding how a best use case of somebody who is growing up, in terms of the industry that they're trying to break in, or a business that they're trying to tap in, or a market that they're trying to enter, is super important in terms of understanding how you want to grow. And in terms of my parents, especially, my parents, to be honest, were my siblings, right? Because that age difference of them learning and then providing, but in terms of understanding the true value of how to live your life, was something that my parents taught me as well, in terms of how you want to spend your life, balancing between religion, professional, and personal achievements, was something that I learned from them.
I really like the fact that you talked about the importance of reading and the significant part that it has when you are growing up, basically, right? I believe a reader is very seldom alone, like lonely, and at the same time, a reader will have an imagination. So the reason I'm connecting this with, I was reading one of the articles where it talked about that the youngest child usually has to make their own space, and because of that constant stimulation, they tend to be geared towards more creative sort of things, right? Or they are more of explorers or adventurous. So I'm tying that with your journey of having worked in different industries, so from telco to going to Kareem to working FMCG. So that was your curiosity, which was basically coupled with the reading that you would have done, right? And then that lifelong student mindset and wanting to just keep on learning got you to where you are. So you're currently working with DNB. So what exactly are you doing with them, and then what is it that they do to begin with anyway?
All right. So Dun & Bradstreet is primarily a data company. I'll explain this a little in detail about who we are and what we do. So Dun & Bradstreet is, by the way, a 170-year-old company. I know a lot of people even in this room might not know about Dun & Bradstreet, and the audience might not know about Dun & Bradstreet as well. But it's a 170-year-old data company whose responsibility and whose main aim is to provide company-level data that helps better in strategic decision making, right? So I'll give you an overview about who we are globally and in Pakistan as well. So globally, we're a 170-year-old company. We are mostly primarily involved around risk analytics. We're involved around data-driven decision making. We provide due diligence solutions, finance solutions. We provide customized products and also some basic products that we already have. So just to give you, for example, just food for thought. So whenever you make an app on Google or Play Store, on Apple Play Store, you have a DUNS number that you require. So that's something that the Dun & Bradstreet business is driving in. And I'm sure you, because you're in the startup sector, you must know about it, right? So imagine the number of companies that come into that database, right? So the responsibility that DNB has is to give ownership of that business level data to specific individuals who want to come to better decision making based on financial data, based on procurement data, based on compliance data, based on screening data, based on financial data, right? So in terms of global level, we are a Fortune 500 company. We have more than 100 offices physically in the world, 200 offices where we're total and present. In terms of Pakistan, we came to Pakistan in 2019. I am the Chief Business Officer for Pakistan, and I'm also handling the African desk remotely as well. So overall, we started off in Pakistan in 2019. It's been around 6 years. Obviously, 2019 COVID also was at the peak. So it's been around three and a half years in terms of driving sales that we've been doing. There are some conventional products that we have that I was talking to you about, but we also have some customizable products. We're dealing with multiple industries, which include startups, where I talked about the DUNS product. We have banks as well, which use our business information reports for better decision making whenever there's a line of credit, because State Bank has a policy that if you have a $20,000 minimum limit of $20,000, you need a third party report, right? So that's an area where we are catering to banks, right? Similarly to corporates, there are different use cases. Some big oil companies are using us in terms of buying oil from different sectors globally, and also doing due diligence with some companies who are buying in terms of credit. So we do credit evaluation as well. We do international screening as well in terms of that. Plus, we also have some FMCGs who are also exploring us. We have a business development product as well, where you can, from here, rather than doing those trade show kind of things where FMCGs usually they do go to trade expos and stuff, but you can sit here, over here, get the details of a customer or a client via email and contact them directly from here, right? So in terms of spending or investment, that's a low cost product to have, right? And also in terms of credit assessment, right? So a lot of these companies, these big value companies, like for example an Engro or a PSO or any other company that we have in the market, or a conglomerate, whenever they're doing a deal, a strategic alignment, whether that's setting up a new plant in any other company or any other country, or any strategic deal with a global partner, they need insights, right? If you don't know whether whoever who is there, whether he's politically affiliated, what is the challenge or what is the corporate linkage that that person has, right? What is the strength of that supplier, whether he's reliable in terms of how he is, right? So that ESG is also one topic we're into as well, right? So I know I've been going a lot into detail about this, but I feel like overall as a business, a country like Pakistan lags behind in terms of making decision making through the power of data, and that is the aim that we have, that we want to empower not just startups, conglomerates, multinational corporations, but also the government on how we can help them use our data or use global data for refined and accurate decision making for the betterment of society.
So, you know, from your experience, right, you mentioned that place like Pakistan can really benefit and we are lagging behind, right? Yeah. What is the simplest use case that is coming to mind in a localized term?
Okay.
That the data that DNB be able to provide to people who are not currently using it?
Okay. So there are 2 to 3 use cases. For example, I'll highlight. So for example, in the corporate sector, there are a lot of companies in Pakistan. For example, I'll go into the startup, for example, the middle, not the conglomerates, but a corporate like a logistics partner or a ride hailing company. For example, we have a product that does screening on individuals and companies as well. So for example, if you're onboarding a rider, because it's not directly a stakeholder that you have, right? Because it's not an employee that you have.
It's a third party.
Absolutely. So it's third party screening intelligence.
Okay.
Right. So what you do is you can maybe screen them. Right now, I'm not really sure how many companies are doing this. I'm sure there must be as well. But I feel like it is a practice that we can instill across the market, right? Because there might be cases where some people who are not the right people to be onboarded, because there's this whole network of competition of acquisition that they want to get so many people on board, right? So that is one area that could be a use case. Another use case could be credit assessment, whereby a lot of companies who, when they're giving credit to a supplier, they just are built on relationships.
I see.
Right? They're more like, okay, I know this person. Yeah, he's a good friend, or he's a supplier. Let's onboard him. That's point number 1. Point number 2 is, okay, this is a company who I know, but what is the perspective of credit that I can give to them, right? For example, you need to have a dedicated model through which what matters to you may not matter to me, right? For example, financial capability for me might not be as important to reputational risk for you, right? Or operational capacity might be important for me, but exports and imports or balance of payments or trade payments might be important to you, right? So I feel like over there we can add value in terms of building a specialized model. We are doing that, but just to highlight a use case, right? A lot of companies are using us because they want to understand and they want to do it the way that they want to do it, rather than the way that anybody else does. And I feel like for us, we also bring that use case of how global companies are doing it, right? So recently we helped a oil company by telling them that a company in Saudi Arabia was using this specific model, and it's in the same industry as you are, it's in the same sector as you are, it has the same capability and power and operational capacity that you have. So that built that use case for that company to replicate or at least evaluate that model according to the lines that are best practices that are happening across the board. And that is an area where we can add value.
So beautiful, right? So you're basically saying that there is ample amount of data and use cases that are being done in emerged markets.
Yeah.
You are bringing them to emerging markets. You're basically localizing those solutions and empowering them so they can have the data-driven decision making in their strategies and in their growth as well. And we will touch on growth in a second. I like and I want so from this conversation, I want to get the understanding myself of the work that is being done, and for the listeners and viewers to understand that as well. So you are saying that currently, let's say there is a ride-hailing company or a delivery company, logistics company, they want to hire someone, the data is absent because you don't know who that guy is, but you will have the access to their sort of like whatever the product that you're talking about, history about that individual. So instead of us trialing and erroring new people, someone who is registered can be vetted or verified through your product. So I can have like 10, 15 or 50 or 100 fleet can be put on the road, which is vetted. So the image or the delivery of the product that you're building is delivered.
Yeah, exactly. So what happens right now is primarily we're judging people based on, for example, their NIC, and it's a very basic onboarding process. However, for companies to safeguard themselves in terms of a big challenge in terms of fraud or compliance, I feel like looking at whether that person has been involved in any adverse media, whether that person has a political affiliation, whether that person is under some trade sanction that they can have. And it's not just on a person level, it's also on a company level as well. So if you want to, for example, onboard a supplier as well, you can check whether that supplier has a director or a business who can be trustworthy, who, for example, I do have a lot of use cases, right? For example, a company recently, they had a list of suppliers, they were working with them for a long period of time, but because reputational risk for them is super important, they stopped working with them because their director was somebody who was politically affiliated in a trade sanction deal, right? So, you know, these use cases come up, right? Unless or until you will do that due diligence today, this will help you make better decision making for tomorrow. And it's not just only about, for example, doing screenings, right? So for example, I'll touch base on another product that I missed, which was our rating reports. So for example, a startup, and I'll go towards two legs, startups and investors as well. So for example, a startup wants to raise money. A recent case came in, a company was in England, and it was based in Pakistan, went to England to an investor, and they said that we want a DNB rated report on who you are, because we use audited financials, we look at it from an independent perspective. Anything that you as an investment or a business are going to give me, I will evaluate independently. If you will tell me add in this, do that, change this, I will not do that, right? Because that is the power that we have, that is the reputation that we have. Similarly, for an investor, if you want to evaluate a business, right, you can use our reports. So we have different type of reports. We have a feasibility report, we have an investment report as well, for example, a loan report as well, that a bank can use. Again, these are practices that are happening globally, not very in detail or extensively in Pakistan, but I feel these are different use cases that can be used locally to help not just your big conglomerates, but even startups. For example, the product that I was telling you in terms of business development, right? You don't need a National Foods or a Shan Foods to build business. You can be a small startup who can also build business directly as well, right? So just making phone calls here rather than people going to US and then cracking a deal, you can crack a deal here from US as well. So yeah.
So what you just touched on is so powerful, right? The power of data. It reminded me of one of the values or a saying that we used to have in one of the startups we were working with, that we believe in God, all else come with the data,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
I've heard that one as well.
you know, so I think it's so exciting that the actual learning or the awareness through the platforms like DNB or the organizations like DNB is coming to Pakistan, it will also help startups build credibility.
Absolutely.
So now a name like DNB coming and you have gone to them and you have invested into doing your due diligence, you are basically getting yourself prepared.
Absolutely.
So if you go and speak to any of the investors, you have the big chunk of the legwork is done.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And educating and getting that across or that option to the startups. Well done to you for explaining that so beautifully, right? Here is one thing that I want to touch on. While I believe in data, right, the intuition part of being a founder, being a startup founder, or being an individual, following that gut, that instinct, that is generally being practiced in places like Pakistan.
True.
Right? A friend of mine visited with me who is not from Pakistan with a foreign lens, and he was just walking around and he was mesmerized with the way the distribution of the electric wires we still have.
Yeah, because it's underground.
Because everything is underground, right? And
Yeah.
he was just standing there for a few minutes, fascinated, and he said to me, it is beyond me that how the system is still working and operating here, right? So a lot of things, even if you go on the road and the traffic is on just like little movement and little sort of the way we drive here, right?
Yeah.
You bring someone who learned how to drive in Europe or in
And they will-
Americas, they will not be able
Absolutely.
to drive, right?
True.
So this is intuition. This is how the way things are done historically. So our subconscious recognizes that. So we have an issue with something new because we don't really embrace change.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, we like something new, right?
True.
We look for something advanced.
True.
So that dilemma that we have internally. So my question is that how do you position yourself when you deal with a market which is so inherently, lean towards the intuitive side of things? So how are you finding that experience?
So I feel and I'll explain this on an individual level and on a professional level as well.
Okay.
So on an individual level, I think it is absolutely exciting because for me to expand my vision, I've been, by the way, primarily associated in Pakistan, so I understand the psyche of the Pakistani person in terms of B2C and B2B. So on a personal level, the best thing about this role that I'm in is that every day is a new day.
Okay.
Right? Because I just explained to you, and this is, by the way, 30% of what we do, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what we have the power of doing, right? So the best part is that we cater to all kind of people who are in the corporate sector or in the startup space. It could be a small startup, it could be a large company, it could be a large startup, it could be a government company, it could be a semi-government company, right? So for me or my team, the best part is that every day is a new day. Today we are dealing with a big company, tomorrow we're dealing with a very small company. Everybody has a different use case on how we can grow them in Pakistan, right? So for me, the biggest challenge, if I could talk to you in Pakistan, is one is the adherence to make a move regarding data. And then the second part is the fact that people don't want to spend money on data, right? Which is the price sensitivity. And I understand that in a market like Pakistan, where inflation is a challenge, GDP numbers are also a challenge, exports are also something. But my suggestion to a lot of corporates or companies is spend today, learn tomorrow, and thrive the day after, right? Because I feel like if you make this judgment call today on how you will use a company, and it's not just us, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of other companies as well that exist, but in terms of the data decision making through data is super important. Especially, I see this gap between a very budding startup and a very established startup. I feel like, and that's something that locally and globally as well, there's a stark difference between how we analyze data and how they analyze data as well. So I feel like overall, we really need to pull our socks up, decide on what we need to do. And today it's going to be a conscious challenge right now. There will be a lot of people who will be still not adaptable to change. They still want to do the things that they are doing for 100 or so years, but the world is changing, right? Just a general thing to tell, but global warming, we saw US changing some radical changes in terms of the tariffs, right? Similarly, if I talk about our geopolitical situation, that changed a lot, but that also has an impact on how we are developing as an economy as well, right? Just to give you an example, for example, in India, DNB is huge, for example. Just a comparison. In Bangladesh, it's also very big, right? Because they have systems and processes which makes it a mandatory requirement for not just public entities, but also private entities to use data for strategic decision making. And that is also why, because that leads to their business also thriving, and indirectly it also then leads to their economy also making a boom. And a lot of companies we have logged were some companies who were working in other ventures through with DNB, who wanted the same thing to be implemented in Pakistan. So yeah.
You triggered a thought.
Yeah.
Being able to use the data critically requires critical thinking.
Absolutely.
Now, if in the DNA or the training that one gets from education system or from the corporates that are actually, operational or the big corporations, if that element is never being utilized, so you're talking about now an educational fact, right? Yeah. This is like inherent capabilities that has to be sort of transitioned.
Yeah.
Do you think that is a big challenge? Because what I have observed, I'm not talking about the exceptions, but we struggle as a nation for critical thinking. We have, that jugaad word that we use, that we are very reactive in finding the solutions. Yeah. But critical thinking requires you to think of things proactively.
Absolutely.
Learn from the data, learn from the history, from the past or other nations, what they have done. Yeah. Do you think this problem we can crack and we can get out of as a nation?
Right.
What is the data telling you after dealing with the people on the ground?
Pakistan. Okay. So you talked about two things. One was the educational transition of how we are receptive to data. And the second was that the people who you're talking with or the people you're interacting with as a nation, how are we going to progress, right? So on the first part, I would say that because I would categorize myself into 3 generations, because my dad is a generation, my siblings are 1 generation, and I am 1 generation. Mm-hmm. So if I talk about the transition of generations, I feel like, yes, there is some difference in terms of learning, in terms of the power of data, because I'm pretty sure my brother or my sister or my dad would not have known the power of data 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? So I feel like as an individual, yes, we are thriving and it's a global phenomena. I'll tell you an example. For example, my sister's daughter, who is in grade 3 or 4, I hope she doesn't kill me on this because she might be seeing this, but she in grade 4 is learning the basics of R and Python in Dubai, right? So my point being here is that as we transition further, from generation to generation, learning is going to revolve around data, AI, and things like that. Mm-hmm. So as an individual, yes, we might not be at par with a developed economy, but as individuals, yes, those seeds are somewhat being instilled. If I look at overall in our education system, right? Now, overall in terms of how decision making is happening in terms of organizations, that is something that we want to empower. And that is also still a big challenge because spending power is low, decision making is slow, budgets are limited, people are hesitant to change, as I say, which is about making the right call, or it's not even about the right call, changing from what is happening for hundreds of years, or in terms of their organizational history of how the business is going and what best works. So nobody is willing to take a risk on data, which is actually a dilemma, because data is something that you can absolutely be sure on saying that, okay, this is the right call to take. right? But what has historically been happening is happening, and that is what is something that we want to bring into Pakistan, which is using the power of data, using the power of AI to make a difference, to help support businesses, to help support governments, to help support our economy towards progress as a nation and as an organization.
So, another thought, you talked about the sensitivity towards investing into data.
Yeah.
So, affordability. So, how does the model differs for DNB, in terms of an emerged market, or, like coming into the educational phase market like Pakistan?
Okay. So I think in terms of our organizational goals, in every venture, the aim is different. For example, in an established market, the prices are going to be different. The product portfolio is going to be different. The offering is going to be variable. It's going to be more customizable because, again, customizability has a larger cost attached to it and hence a larger price, right? But on a positive side, Pakistan is a talent hub for us in this region because the people that we have, again, since costs are lower here, so we're trying to build our data centers over here. We're trying to bring in the best talent in terms of content over here, and we want to build this market as a regional hub for all our other markets as well. So in terms of what DNB is trying to do as a system, as an organization, is trying to empower people over here. But obviously in every other market, if I compare to the established market, again, Pakistan is in the middle phase where we are right now trying to build the power of branding, build the power of visibility, and tell people who is DNB, right? What does DNB do? It might not happen today, maybe not tomorrow, but day after tomorrow, there will be people who will ask us, right? And I've seen that happening in the short period that I've been in. The power of social media is great, by the way. We lock a deal, we post a picture of it. Two other companies come and know, oh, this is DNB. Then they search on the company, oh, DNB is huge. They thought of us as a startup. But globally, it's one of the biggest companies in the world. It's a stock exchange listed company. It has more than 600 million companies data available, updates 1 million times, 2 million times a day, right? So no human intervention, AI driven, right? So a lot of the presidents, by the way, US presidents have also worked with DNB, right? So just telling you the power of who we are as an organization and that people overall can benefit from how we as an organization are trying to invest in Pakistan. And we generally and genuinely believe that Pakistan is a major talent hub. Pakistan is a major hub for growth. Yes, times are hard right now, but it will turn better. Like Batman's movie, The Night is Dark Before the Dawn. So I'm going to mention another quote that you just did.
So you mentioned that the presidents of the United States have worked with DNB. In terms of policy in Pakistan, on a governmental level, what is the sort of response?
Okay.
Are the policies favorable? Do you have that kind of support? Are we happy or willing to share that kind of data? Do we want to have all of that documented?
Right. Okay. So I'll answer this in a two-pronged scenario. One is the ongoing situation that is until now, which is the 5 years that we've been in. There have been multiple discussions with different government sectors. We are, by the way, in the process of also locking one initiative, one very big strategic initiative with another government sector, which will also add a lot of value, right? But overall, if I compare the public sector with the private sector, I feel like reaction times are slower, responses are delayed. It's very difficult to enter a door unless or until you know someone who has a political or a public level association with someone, right? So for example, if you call up today any government organization, for you to reach the decision maker, it's going to take you X+1 amount of time. Whereas me, if I am somebody who knows people in the government, who knows people who want to make the ends meet, it will be easier. That's point number one. Point number two is instability, right? Because there's such a big shift of people changing, the government's changing, elections and all. I don't want to go into a lot of detail about what is happening in the country, but I'm just saying overall in terms of an organization, it's very difficult for us to get into a room with someone and then make a decision. Then they tell us, okay, it's all sorted. Then the government changes, or then business changes, or then the dynamics of the government
policies
change and preferences change and new people come in and then they have another perspective. But overall, I feel like we are trying to look into this. I feel like as an organization, we also have a responsibility with the Pakistani government as well, where we want to add in as much value as we can. We are all open to working with the government as well, whether that could be any ministry, whether that could be any trade zone, or any other entity which wants to use us, for example, to boost their exports, for example, to reduce their costs, or to limit their, or to explore global procurement suppliers, for example, right?
Trusted.
Yeah, or for example, if they want to find the right kind of supplier for the right kind of product. So I feel like, yes, we are in the process of doing it. It's usually easier in developed markets where you directly, they have policies as well, they have delays as well, but they're very streamlined. These processes are very easily driven, right? You know what to do, you know how to do it. Over here, the only challenge that I face and my organization faces is the time and the balance of power that is happening in terms of policy.
So when you describe the challenge or the lead time or how you are going to be able to get to the decision maker, you are doing that simultaneously. So it's like you said, two-prong sort of an answer you were going to give, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that, are you building that utility, or have you built that utility in Pakistan over the last 5 years that you can bring to say that, okay, look, we have all of this data that we didn't have before we came in. So are you at that stage where you can literally go and sit and blow someone's pants off and say, wow?
Yeah. Okay, so that's a very good question. Again, very fun question. So in terms of Pakistani data, it's very difficult for us to get that data, because in Pakistan, again, we also have a policy that it's very difficult. Like, for example, if I compare your Europe and the US side, it's easier for data because policies are such that you have to give exposure. For example, if you want to onboard a supplier, you need to look at their books. Those books need to be there, right? Those exposure levels are something that are easier, right? But in a market like Pakistan, because we're so adjacent or so negative about sharing our accomplishments, sharing our potential, sharing our capacities, sharing our operational limitations, or even our operational wins or our financial capabilities or strengths, that yes, right now we are working towards gathering data, and we have done a lot of work in trying to capture Pakistani data, but still we are not there. It's a work in progress. It will always be a work in progress. But I would say that in the 5 years that we've been in, the day that we started in and the day that we are today, I think we have grown leaps and bounds, even more than what we imagined to be over here. So I feel like, yes, if you want to get a global understanding, we are a company that will blow anybody away. Also the fact that we are very customizable, right? So we have conventional products, and we have we can tell you that, okay, if you want a specific data set regarding a certain entity or a certain sector in the global economy or in a country as well, we can scrape that data and share it with you as well. For example, in Saudi, there's a company that is using, for example, the media. They want to analyze media as a research. So what we're doing in Saudi is that we're picking all the media chatter, whether that is in Arabic, whether that is in English, whatever, local, international, and we're giving it to that company. Now that's just a separate use case that is separate from us, from the normal products that we have, right? So we also have the power of sharing that data insights. You want us to develop that insight, we have the capability as well. You just want the data, we have that capability as well. So it's on how you want to leverage us.
So two things just came to mind listening to you, right? One is to do with why we are not open to sharing our vulnerabilities, right? Or the businesses are not very open to share their failures. I've always talked about it, and I say it repeatedly, that one must have a healthy relationship with failure, because it's not the opposite of success, it's rather a part of success. So what is your take on that? And the second part, or the second thought that came to mind, which we will come after you have shared what you think about the failure and importance of failure, is that if someone currently is building something innovative in Pakistan with a global view, that they have global ambition and they are obviously acting local currently, but if they want to enter different markets, how you would sort of, like
empower them, or
empower
how can
them
I
and
support them?
assist them? Yeah.
Okay. So the first part, I would like to say that in terms of how we're trying to develop, fail fast is something I learned at Kareem, by the way.
Okay.
It was a term that we used to say that you learn fast, but you fail fast as well. You try something up, and that's the beauty of a startup, where you tried something up and then you tell, and you realize your mistake, and then you backtrack, you try to save grace, and then you move on to the next step, right? I think it is based on the organizational setup as well.
Culture.
Exactly. So I feel like organizational culture is something that also drives this, that is separate for every industry and every stage that that company is in. So I feel like that is also very different. Like in a startup, failing is not a problem, right? Because there are so many things, you don't know what your organization is heading into. So the six projects that you're ongoing, not all of them are going to are going to work up. So some of them are going to fail, some of them are going to progress. So you need to prioritize. So I feel like failing fast is something that needs to be instilled. And then the second question that you had was whether a budding startup or a company, how can we as DNB support them, right? So there are two things. One of which, actually three, by the way, I just remembered one more. So the first one could be, for example, you get a DUNS number, but we also have a DUNS seal, which we have, for example, a global registry in which you purchase a seal with us, and that global registry is present all over the world. So there is a website on which you, for example, or me, if I'm an investor and if I want to check you out, who you are, just the basics of whether that company exists or not, regardless of whether you know me or not, you can search that company up, and then you click on it, and then there's a seal that you click on, and then you can see there's a badge attached that, okay, ABC company, this is the office, this is the main director, CEO, whatever hierarchy. That is point number one. Point number two is something that I mentioned to you, which is in terms of business development. If you want to build a big deal, if you want to procure a product, you, for example, in Tanzania or Cayman Islands, for example, you want to head in, or Germany, etc. So you don't know which industry that, for example, you are a specific, let's say I make watches and I make a very innovative watch. I want to know which are the competitors or which are the businesses who buy watches or sell watches. So I can use that specific platform to understand, or even if it's an extensive, capital intensive business, right? So in that perspective, you might need their financials as well, right? You might need to know who their partners are as well. So a business information report can also help you. And then finally, the business rating report, which you develop once, so that that happens after a later stage. For example, if you've been a year or two in the business, that you can use to, for example, not just seek investment, but also to expand operations. Because a lot of these global companies, for example, Walmart, recently a case happened, and it's something that happens globally as well. Some companies came to us because Walmart demanded from them that they want a DNB rated report from them, right? So there are multiple, they are global partners, right? So we have global partners who do demand these things. So rather than them asking for them and going towards just a Walmart, why don't you tackle a Walmart of, for example, a Europe or an Australia or a New Zealand or an Africa or a Middle East, right? So why don't you build that report preemptively, so that you, rather than them asking you for that report, you say like, hey, here you go. That builds that perspective that, oh, this company is associated with DNB and they have that in their perspective.
It's like a powerful hook that you're
Absolutely.
walking in with,
Yeah.
right? That this
Yeah.
is something that we have proactively done. So
Yeah.
despite the fact that what media tells you or what you may have heard about Pakistan's
Yeah.
situation, we are operating, and we are not only operating, we are providing services to X, Y, and Z.
Absolutely.
And here is the sort of like
Authenticity
about it from DNB.
True.
That's wonderful. And, so you were, like we talked about, different industries. How did you handle the transitions from sort of one role to another? And are you doing something with that kind of diverse, like background and portfolio that you have in assisting the up and coming entrepreneurs or startups? Are you involved in that kind of work? So the two things that I just...
All right. Okay, so the best part that I can tell about this is because I can tell you, for example, that the beauty of getting this kind of a diverse background in terms of my experience and also the startup scene was that a lot of these companies who are still conglomerates today, somehow they're people who I know, right? because they're also part of the same group of people, because the startup industry is very close knitted, right? We have the Kareem Mafia, we have a Daraz Mafia, we have different mafias, our graduates or our alumni from different school of thoughts who are there. So this is a very close knit area, or a
Everybody
close knit
knows
community
everybody,
where
yeah.
everybody somehow or the other, whether that is educational background, whether that is personal stuff, whether that is educationally, whether that is friendships, siblings or friend of siblings, right? So more or less we are in touch. So for example, I'll give you an example. For example, the CEO of Dastagir, for example, was with me when I was in Lahore, when I was in Coke OS. I'm sure you must know about him. Or the Retailu CEO Wahaj was also a friend's friend, right? Airlift was also built around that time. Swivel was also built around. So this whole ecosystem is somehow or the other associated amongst the same people. We again, I'm not always in touch with them, but whenever we meet or greet, we discuss, we talk about how we are, and also in terms of supporting on an organizational level. We are also going to find, we are also, by the way, again, I'm not supposed to say this, but we are also on the verge of signing an agreement with different organizations or startups or ecosystems or accelerator programs, where we are also trying to empower people on how they can use us, how can they understand what makes different companies in the world. And in the long run, it's just a wish list that other companies or other startups might have, which is that global exposure that they have. My vision in the long run is that how can TNB as an organization push these startups to find the investors in different markets that are in the region for this specific organization. So that's my long run vision, especially for startups. But as of now, because we're not in the state of aligning, or we're still in the progress stage, where businesses are also exploring how they are, they're also building up, they're scaling. We don't want to keep the half-cooked product at the table of specific investor, and I think that would be detrimental as well.
100%.
Right? So I think it's important right now that they understand the requirement, they understand the power of decision making, they scale their operations up, they understand how can we equip them, because we're not just someone who can, in terms of advanced products, these are budding startups or accelerating startups that can also utilize it.
So do you have any programs or credits where startups are encouraged to use some of your products, which basically will in return give you the database per se, which is with integrity, because the startups would want to give you everything without you having to chase. So do you have that sort of a program in the pipeline or currently ongoing?
So I think the answer to this would be that, for example, we already have a data team. Our data team is responsible for ensuring that Pakistan's data increases by 10-folds, right? So you already have a dedicated team. Their job is to get in touch with people, ask them, because we want to build a database specific to Pakistan, right?
100%.
But again, the challenge that presents is that not everybody is willing to expose their data, right? So in a lot of cases, and I'll tell you a funny case where if companies want to deal with you, or if they want to work with you, you are willing to give data to DNB, right? But if you want to preemptively give that data, it's very difficult for us to get the data. However, we are in a phase where we are trying to build that level where we position ourselves as such that we want to empower organizations, or especially startups, where they want to learn, where they want to understand how they can expose themselves to the betterment of their organization, and how can we build it. But again, I feel it's a little early right now. I feel like the partnerships or the strategic alignments that we do can lead to that in terms of that, but because we're in a very nascent stage as of now, I feel we would want a little bit of time to come up to that. But there are big plans. Our hierarchy is such and our management is such that they do not discourage anything as of now. They are very open to how can we expand business, how can we support, and it's a two-pronged thing, right? It will benefit not just us, but it will benefit organizations, startups, and it's a wave that we all need to step up on, because the world is evolving.
You know, one of the problems that I have identified, so we didn't really touch on it, but I have been out of the ecosystem for 20 plus years, right? And I landed here last year, end of last year. So I'm still learning the market. I'm still doing my primary research to understand. So I have invested in startups, have been involved in the startups, right? So what I have noticed with aspiring entrepreneurs or startups at the really really early stage, they don't understand the importance of setting up their data room or have the due diligence or proactive measures in place. And then they do have ambitions and these reasonable product to scale it out to the different markets. At the initial stages, if they have something, what I'm just thinking of, through DNB, right, we will be able to educate them, or at least the fresh cohorts or the wave of the founders that are coming out from Pakistan's ecosystem who are proactively prepared, which will add to the image of the quality of the entrepreneurs or startups that we are building, right? So that's something we can more definitely talk about in a food for thought. But I think that angle is very important because even the quality of the incubation or accelerator applications, or if I would have done the, like let's say judging and stuff, I would have found that people have not an iota of an understanding that what they need to do, right?
Agreed.
So then what you're doing is reactively stopping your operations or trying to clear out the mess or going through that additional work which you could have easily avoided, right?
Yeah.
So that's something, came to mind. So as we are coming towards the end of our conversation, and you have been very good and, sharing with what you shared, I think it's very meaningful for startups particularly and businesses to see how they can leverage the data. With your experience, having worked in this volatile market, what is the piece of advice that you have for people who want to, start their own startups? And I want to give you a little bit of a context and a background. Why am I asking this question? Along with the learning that I shared with you about the ecosystem here, where nobody takes it serious, that they want to raise external, like funding, but they don't want to do what is required or what are the rules, right? Because they don't really understand the first principles, the basics. So what I often find is that people have a huge amount of confusion between starting a business and a startup. Okay? Starting a business, generally the traditional businesses have known playbooks.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of data that is available. Oftentimes, a startup is going after solving a problem that hasn't been solved before.
Exactly.
So there is going to be a lot of trial and error, as you just earlier on just shared. You are testing, you're failing fast, you're adjusting according to the data that you are attaining by talking to your customers or by talking to the people in your little ecosystem that you're trying to build. So people not having that understanding, and then the due diligence element, and then you are working in a volatile market where the capital is not abundant.
True.
So what is the piece of advice that you would give to aspiring founders in that light?
Right. Okay. So I feel like, great question, by the way. If I look at Pakistani startups overall, I feel like in terms of scale, the one thing that I've seen as a challenge is that it has always been quantity over quality, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it has always been, how can I increase my sales? How many suppliers can I bring in? Nobody thinks to care about churn, concepts like retention. It's all about acquisition, but they also need to understand that the retention part is something that is absolutely important for
more important, in my opinion.
So the value that a retained customer or a retained supplier can drive in, because you're not spending a cost on them, right? You're spending more towards people who don't matter because they have a retention period of, let's say, 10-15 days. They will come into your system, you're going to show to the management, oh wow, I have a huge amount of sale and a pipeline. They're going to go after 10 days, right? So rather than organizations spending on bringing in new businesses, yes, that is a part that will always be there. It has to be there because any investor will always look at growth. However, how you are driving that growth is super important in terms of the customer, in terms of the supplier as well. I usually try to give this advice in terms of even anybody who is coming up with the plan, it's not just specifically a startup or a business as well, is that they need to understand the funnel of customers, which is demand and supply. And they also need to understand that how can they change their business, not the fundamentals, but how can they improve day by day, right? Everybody would want to invest in a startup which is on a growth trajectory, but on a profitable growth trajectory as well, because nobody wants to put in money and then lose it all up, right?
Absolutely, and only smart money is available now,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
Moving forward,
Yeah.
that madness of money being given left,
Yeah.
right, and center is
Yeah.
gone anyway.
So yeah, exactly. So I feel like right now, it is a combination of not just having a viable product, but also having a viable financial, also having viable type of finances, also having viable type of business models, also making sure that your customer and your market is a fit, right? I've seen a lot of startups, by the way. Some failed, some responded, and if you compare, I'm sure because you've spent around, you told me a long period of time abroad, so I'm sure you must have seen the difference between a local pitch and an international pitch, right? I feel like due diligence needs to be super important. I feel like doing your homework, it's so basic as, for example, going in a pitch and practicing 20 times about what you're trying to say, managing time, right? You have 10 minutes.
Basic hygiene,
right?
yeah.
You have 10 minutes. What can be the best things that you say in those 10 minutes that can impress the people who are sitting on the table, right? A lot of investors don't even talk about sales or financials in those 10 minutes, right? Why would I invest in something where I don't even know what the business is doing, right? Or who my top customers are, what are my growth plans, what does this product do? So basic things, small tweaks, not a lot of differences, but I feel in terms of understanding, there is still a long way where businesses can understand the true value. I am not saying that the business value is not there. The business model might be there, but in terms of scaling and scaling smart is something that can be there.
You just touched on something. I was speaking with the team just yesterday, actually. We hop,
Yeah.
right? So we just want to keep on chasing. We are in a rush without a direction.
Yeah.
We just want to just jump so that reflects into businesses or startup founders as well, right? That we just want to grab and do with it what? Nothing. So you're gaining something and you have a leak, you're constantly leaking, and you think that you're making progress. But that's just, just motion, nothing else, right? So thank you so much for being very candid. And I really enjoyed the conversation. And personally, if you were to ask me, if a founder does not understand the value of data, I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole. Why? Because if they cannot quantify, if they don't know what they are doing, what are they going to do with my money, right? So that is something super detrimental, right, for everybody to understand. So as a part of a tradition, what we do for the last number of episodes here, we have a message, right, that what we do here is for the 3% who dare to redefine what's possible, okay? And we ask every guest, right, a departing guest, to share the 3 things that those 3% should have in their toolkit.
Right.
So the last guest we had, they shared that, purpose-driven why is a must, being resourceful is very important, and then leading and understanding humans with empathy. So empathy so these are the 3 things that they shared is a must for someone who is aspiring founder or doing a meaningful impact-driven work, right? So the 3%. What are those 3 things from your lens you would like to share with us today?
Great. Okay, so I'll talk about 3 things that are super important for any individual in not just their professional life, but also their personal life if they want to become the top 3%, in which the aim of this podcast is. So I'd like to start off with the first and the most important, which is resilience. I feel like resilience is super important if you want to work your way up. Not every day is going to be the perfect day for you. You need to stick it out. If I talk about just myself, I was never the smartest person in the room. I feel like I was the most hardworking and resilient person in the room in terms of how I tried to understand what is going on. And there is no shortcut towards growth, right? So you have to take it step by step. I know there's a lot of Gen Z perspective of, oh, we want to grow today, tomorrow, faster, faster, faster. Yes, that's ambitious, great, but stick at it, right? Don't focus towards changing the tools about how you want to do it, right? Don't go towards a different direction. Yes, you want to experiment, sure, experiment. Even as a business, yes, you need to think about being resilient towards what your core model is, right? So that is point number one that I had in mind. The second point that I had in my mind was make sure you have laser focus. I feel like focus is something that you need to be absolutely certain about what you want to do in life, what you want to do as a business, or what you want to do as a startup or an organization. One reason why a lot of organizations, if you just touched upon, is failing is also because they put their hands in so many buckets that they don't know which bucket is the one that will fetch the water for them, right? So I feel like that is something that is super important, that they need to know how and who is this business for, what is my USP and how can I drive it, and then once they know it, and then they need to be concentratedly focusing towards that goal, and what that goal is growth, whether that goal is retention, whatever that goal is. And then the third thing that I would want to highlight is that adaptability is key, right? And it's on an overall level where the world is changing. In the last 3-4 years, I touched upon this as well a little earlier, but in the last 3-4 years, we've seen the global scenario changing. We've seen the political scenario changing as well. There's climatic change as well, right? So adaptability is key. There's a lot of wave of AI that is coming in, and if we do not equip ourselves, or if we do not become people who are willing to adapt to change as a nation, as an organization, or as an individual, I feel like that is super important for us to progress. And if we cannot ride that wave, then either we falter behind, or we are left in chasing shadows of not trying to become the excellence of what we're trying to be, which is at the cream. Everybody at the top wants to be at the top, right? They want to stay there, and they want to become even higher than what they are, right? So I feel like adaptability to change is also super important. So yeah.
So we are finishing this conversation on a high. You are saying that one must be resilient. If they know what they are after, they should at least give it a fair shot.
Yeah.
Then you are saying that you must have laser focus, because there is a lot of noise out there,
Yeah.
and the shiny object syndrome or jumping from one to another will always wear you off the path. And then you're saying that be super agile, have the adaptability, because the world is changing, it will continuously be changing. So anticipate the change, and just be positioning yourself ready to take on whatever life or the world has to throw at us. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
You've been phenomenal.
Thank you, Amin. It was great.